This is going to be a little bit different. Hope you don't mind. I've been thinking a lot about Iain M. Banks and Ursula Le Guin. These are two masters of science fiction who I am a big fan of and who both wrote works that contain my instinct is to use the word culture, but that's a problem because Banks is actually called the culture. A sort of alliance of worlds or of people from worlds. Le Guin's, there's a planet called Hain, and we are descendants, but so are many other planets in our galaxy have descendants of this, and we're like hundreds of thousands of years after the people of Hain colonized Earth, and we've forgotten about them, is the idea. And there's other planets that are also colonized by human-like people. And then there's this thing called the Ekumen, which is a coalition of people from more advanced. This is problematic in the Guin world. I'm just going to skip over that, though. And they are finding and reaching out to and guiding a little bit, but mostly just documenting and connecting with other planets that maybe don't even know that there are other planets out there. In the culture, you have a different situation where it's like a bunch of different species and also artificial intelligences living in a coalesced culture called the culture that also interfaces with planets and species and civilizations outside of the culture. So it's probably good to just discard the idea of species and just to consider all people as people, whether or not they have a common descendant, and just say these are two groups of people that are somewhat galaxy spanning, but interact with other groups of people outside of their group. I don't know, that's as good as I can do on short notice. I'd love to be the kind of person who puts together like a kick-ass video essay on the juxtaposition of the Ecumen, which is the Le Guin culture, and the culture, which is the Banks culture, and have it be really sparkly and great, but I'm just not. And so I'm just gonna off the dome talk about a bunch of what I've been thinking about through the lens of these science fiction novels. And there's a bunch of, both of these authors have several works that take place inside of these universes. The interesting thing to me that Le Guin and Banks take two very different views of what the purpose of a group like that would be. And that comes from having different views of what path humans are likely to take or should take. So in the example of the culture, we have basically what the accelerationist tech bros think that they are working towards, which heck, maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not being derogatory because the culture is great. If you worked toward the culture, then that would be, I think, a positive outcome. They consider us, the culture would consider Earth to be, I think it actually stated in a short story, Earth is considered to be a sort of early level 3 civilization, which means we started to do a little bit of space flight. We've got some nuclear capability. But we haven't sort of gotten in high level artificial intelligence yet. And we haven't gotten, the really deep control of biology yet. And the culture is level 7, 8, 9. And then level 10 is complete disassociation from bodies. And you've just sort of moved on to something that, we can't understand. And so they have this civilizational ranking. And when they find civilizations outside of their group, they can sort of immediately see where they are on that path. That doesn't guarantee that you're going to continue down the path or that you'll ever make it further down the path. But you could see there's a path that species go on, and they head off into a pretty structured, easy to identify where you are on the path. This sort of 7, 8, 9 culture stuff is quite good. It's post-scarcity. No one wants. I think there's a line that money is a sign of poverty. They're always sort of shocked and have a difficult time dealing with money because they don't live in a world that requires money because they can have whatever they want. They have very long lifespans. They're transhuman, so they can change their gender. They add lots of different stuff to their biology so that they don't have to, if they don't want to, experience pain. They can be stronger. If they need to suddenly be stronger, they have glands that they have engineered inside of themselves. And they can live a very long time, practically infinitely, but maybe not. They have fully functioning, sentient companions who are mechanical, who are not biological or anyway. I don't know if mechanical is the right word. And so they have all of this stuff that's good, and it's very difficult to die. Life is prized very highly, but they're also very interventionalist in other worlds. So almost all of the culture stories that I've read don't really take place in the culture. They take place at the fringes of the culture, kind of because maybe life inside the culture is a little bit boring. Like, how could you tell a story about that? Everybody's fine. There's no scarcity. There's not a lot of drama. I mean, of course, people will still have like lovers, quarrels and stuff, but there's a lot of discussion of the part of the culture that goes off into worlds that are outside of their group and intervenes because they are terrible in one way or another. It's morality I agree with. The cultures that the culture goes out and interferes with do suck. For sure. And this interventionism really does sort of like place the culture at both a sort of like is moved to a higher plane, both technologically and culturally and like morally. And so in this vision of the world, all of those things travel together. And that's where I like have a little bit of a problem with it because I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that there are obviously times when you could have a civilization that's less advanced technologically and more advanced morally, but that's like the Banksian like utopia here. You've got Banks's worlds, the culture worlds. You've post-scarcity. People don't suffer. They don't have to suffer. People very rarely die. The human life, sentient life, is praised so highly that it's very difficult for them to die unless they are, choose, and their culture is full of choice, full of freedom. You can do whatever you want. You can leave the culture if you want to. But the dramas really occur, like the book dramas occur on the edges where they are intervening in these less advanced worlds to help bring them into the culture, maybe. There's a lot of like, hey, you don't know yet how terrible you are. We can bring you in and we can make you part of this great thing that's where you're headed anyway, but we can smooth that transition a little bit. So that's the culture. And then we have the Ekumen, which is a loose group of far fewer worlds. And their vibe is much more observational in the way that the culture had this like ranking, level 3, level 5 world. The Ecumen is much more about classification. There's like lots of different categories and how a world or a nation within a world might be classified in different categories is very diverse. And they could be in a lot of different, like they could be good in some ways and bad in some ways. And it's very complex. And the Ecumen is very open to moralities that are different from theirs. And there are times when they intervene, but it's very rare. And they don't like it. They don't like doing the interventions. It's very contentious when they do the interventions, like kind of the prime directive in Star Trek where, if you have a world, even if things are very bad and the people are suffering, if they don't know about you yet, if they're not a spacefaring civilization yet, you cannot show yourself. Which I think in Star Trek has always felt a little bit like a plot device. It's just like it makes it, so that problems are harder to solve. And also maybe explains why we don't see aliens because they have their own prime directive. It makes a lot more sort of, I think, internal cohesive logical sense in the Ecumen because they really do have this other view of how humans are, which is much more in touch with our biological reality. There's still elements of transhumanism. Both of these future worlds, like some of the worlds have elements of transhumanism. I mean, the culture is very body modification. You also have elements of body modification or sort of transhumanist, different ways of being, either very large or very small. And then there's a planet, a Left Hand of Darkness planet. I think it's Gethin, and it has people who they're sort of ambisexual and only have sexual characteristics at certain times of their lives, and they don't have sexual characteristics at other times, which is, I think, indicated to be something that was engineered at some point, though. At the point that the story takes place, it no longer is engineered. It's just the way that those people are. But the important thing here is that in Banks's novels, there is like a path that humans are going down. There's a path that sentient species go down, and they head toward off into this like post-scarcity, abundant future, the kind of thing that the accelerationists want us to be accelerating toward. The tension I have here is that both of these visions of sentience and the future of sentient beings make internal logical sense to me, and I am compelled by both of them, but they are contradictory. I probably should have said that at the top, but I didn't, because that's what this video is. I do not have time to write this into a thing, and I know that this is not going to be a banger. For people of the world who have both read a lot of Le Guin and a lot of Banks, would you like to have a quick conversation about the fundamental difference between those two visions of the future of a sentient species? I haven't gotten deep enough into the Ecumen, though. So in Le Guin's version of all of this, it is less about like escaping biological reality and more about the beauty of human diversity and how there's going to be all these different versions of how we can do it. And there's limits to that understanding and limits to connections between cultures that are very different to each other, but that does not mean antagonism. It just means mutual existence without understanding. I find that very beautiful. And I find it all, like, in many ways more likely. I think it would be a bit of a shame to head off into one sort of consistent culture, like one culture that has trillions of beings inside of it and everybody's more or less following the same moral frameworks and worldviews and using the same technological tools, etc. And there's like a real beauty to also the sort of like a biological appreciation as humans as arising from biology and deeply connected to our biology, and thus not escaping our biology and also not escaping death. The Ecumen is hesitant in the way that the culture is bold. It assumes there's going to be contradictions and complexity, and it assumes that there's going to be pain. Pain is not to be escaped in the way that literally characters in Banks's novels are horrified of the idea of pain because they have never experienced true pain because they can turn it off if they need to. Obviously, pain serves us in many ways, like mild discomfort, etc. So like they don't turn off pain completely, but they are basically immune to torture if they are on a world that doesn't understand their systems, which they often are, because they can just turn pain off and pretend to be tortured. The Ecumen is also like, it feels very generational. It feels like it is a progress that like has the turnover of humans, whereas the culture seems like more like planet spanning art projects and like joie de vivre, you might say, like the sins of the flesh, except without sinning, because they don't have the sinning, but they do not shy away from pleasure. The culture is much more sort of focused on like how much energy you can capture, like how much stuff you could do with the energy that you capture, and like the abilities of a sentient species, which does feel like the human path so far. A lot of constantly increasing capabilities. And then you got the Ecumen, which is more about coexistence, and it's not like a ladder you're climbing up. It's a web of many different civilizations doing things many different ways, and that being good, that being beautiful, and that being like the thing the Ecumen prizes over anything else is the ability and the opportunity that has been granted to them by this bizarre situation they are in to discover these new civilizations that are so different from theirs. And they love that. That's the thing that brings them joy, is to connect with people who are different from them. As like a constant tension in my understanding of the future of humans. These two different visions from these two different authors who both are dead, and so I cannot ask them questions, and I cannot see them in conversation, though I wonder if they ever did converse. I mean, it looks like Banks was a fan of Le Guin, though I wouldn't be surprised if Le Guin wasn't super into Banks. But who knows? Who knows? I have not found information on that. But it fascinates me that in both of these universes, the stories are often of like the ambassador or the infiltrator, the spy, who is coming into a world outside of a group that has got things mostly figured out, but the way that they approach that is so vastly different, with Banks oftentimes being about deliberately undermining the power structures in order to speed the progress of a world or a civilization toward the culture so that it can join up with where it was heading anyway. Whereas the ambassadors of the Ecumen are heading into a world just to observe, just to understand. The suffering that they find there is not to be solved. It is just part of the biological reality of being a sentient species, which is biological. We have transcended biology some. We have transcended biology through largely through medicine, but also through I guess not largely through medicine. We've that was actually totally wrong. The biggest way that we've transcended biology is through communications technologies, writing. That's probably the number one way. Well, actually, no. Language, of course. Language is the biggest way that we transcend biology. Language is not biological. Language is not biological. Is language biological? That's another topic for another video. But certainly, once language moves on into the written word, it is technological. But I would say even before that, I would say that language from the get-go is a technology. And so that path, that beginning of the movement out of biology into culture and then into technology is, wow. I mean, like, that does feel like we are headed on that path, but it also feels like we don't come together as much. Like, we're not like filtering into a single path. And I don't feel like we should filter into a single path. And the only way that we can avoid that fate is by having the kind of openness to difference that the Ecumen has, and that the culture very much doesn't have. And like, it's understandable, because when I read the books, I also would not feel understanding and open to the cultures that the culture is infiltrating and trying to undermine and change. They suck. Just like, because like, of course they do. Sometimes they're us. Like, we suck. Both worlds very, very worth exploring. The fact that they kind of both take the same conceit of a group of worlds that have a lot of stuff figured out, sending ambassadors into worlds that are a little bit more, they're different. They're not always bad. They're different, and sometimes they're great. But there's always suffering in these other worlds. There's just tension there for me. I don't know whether the thing to be is accelerating out of the suffering and limitations of the human biology. But I know that we do that a lot, and I like it when I have done it in the past. Like, I like not suffering. I like having plenty of food. I like TikTok. Like, I like these technologies. TikTok on the edge. But like, the big question is, will everyone want to follow the path toward like a culture like accelerationism? Or will there be lots of different... I think that there will be lots of different groups. But a lot of this stuff does suck everyone in. You give a person a Coke, they're going to like a Coke. Nobody doesn't like a Coke. Nobody doesn't want more Coca-Cola. You give a person a smartphone, they mostly like the smartphone. Like, mostly everybody is like, yeah, not just because I need it, because I want it. Some people don't want it and only have it because they need it. But most people, if you get down to brass tacks, if you really get through all of the complaining that we do, we want it. We like it. It's great. Yeah, I guess here's what it is I feel a tremendous amount of affinity for both of these, like, visions of a sentient future, but they are definitely contradictory. I like them both, and they contradict each other, and they kind of, in my mind, take up a space of like an actual big internal battle I have. I don't think that it necessarily needs to be a battle. There's certainly a case to be made for like a middle path. Like, you don't have to do it one of these two ways. And we are currently in like the world as it exists right now is a middle path where there's some interventionism, and like America sends spies and tries to direct people in different ways, and Russia interferes with elections, and we interfere with elections, and there's like that interventionism going on. But at the same time, there are lots of cultures who have like diversity that they are using to grow distinctly, and like that diversity is something that they have, and their difference is something they have a lot of pride in, and they want to hold on to, and they are successfully holding on to without, violent opposition at the moment anyway. But if there are other people who are fans of both of these things, I would love to see your comments. It's just something I've been thinking about a lot, especially in a world where accelerationists both have a lot of power and are like more correct right now. Like, when it was about NFTs and Bitcoin, it was like, this isn't like, that's not, I don't see the accelerationism. But I think as far as artificial intelligence goes, there is a good chance that this actually is a pretty accelerationist moment. Things are going to be pretty different 10 years from now. And there have been periods like that of like great change. And I think we might be headed into a great change time. It's going to be a weird 10, 20 years. And so it's just something that I'm thinking about a lot right now. It feels more present now that it feels like things are actually changing at a more rapid pace. And also in a pace that it leans a lot on technological like movements out of just humanity, movements out of just what it is to be biological, and into like all of this technical space. And who knows when computers will start suffering along with us. They certainly seem to in the culture. Bunch of whinies sometimes, the culture computers. Anyway, don't get hit by a knife missile, everybody, and try to be at peace. It's a weird moment we're in.